if you've had animals, when they get nervous or when they see something happening or they're anticipating something, they'll pace that gate, right? They want to get out. They know where the gate is. They know that they can get out, or they know it's time. I got bird dogs. When it's time to train, when I had several, they'd all stand there, right? And some of my dogs were smarter than the others. They knew how to take that paw and lift that latch so they could get out on their own, right? They wanted to be free. They wanted to go. They wanted to do their thing. And that nervous and that anxiety and that anxious as it builds up in them, they had to do something, so they're pacing back and forth with energy. The corral, though, understand this. In the corral, in that dog pen, is safety, security, and provision and care are all provided to that animal when they're in that corral. Sometimes for us, we don't want to wait on God's provision. Things that we see, things that we hear. You know, an animal can hear those coyotes howling in the distance, makes them nervous, makes them pacing that gate. And we forget that inside of God's boundaries, those boundaries He's given us to live in our life, if we live inside those boundaries, it says that He'll keep us safe, there's security, and He provides for us. So as we pace the gate, as we talk about trusting in God these next several weeks, we're going to look at some tough stories in the Bible. And I'm telling you right now, the hardest one is probably this week. Adam and Mark both asked me, are you sure you want me to read that passage? Yeah, I do. I want you to read that passage because Leah's story, man, that is a real hard story. Our verse for this whole session, I know you've seen it. You probably have it written on a plaque in your office or at your home. Isaiah 40, verse 31. But they who wait for the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. They will run and not be weary. They will walk and not faint. Pacing the gate sometimes, but are we willing to wait on God? Are we willing to rest knowing that He knows what's best? Leah's story is intertwined with Jacob's, and we can't talk about her without talking about Jacob. Now, when we talk about Jacob, I want you to understand God tells Israel that I am the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. That's what God says. When you read the Bible, I am here to tell you that Jacob was a lawyer, used car salesman, insurance salesman. What other people do you like that try and swindle you? You want to throw in there? That's Jacob. That's Jacob. He swindled his brother for a bowl of chili. It was different than chili, but I'm going to say chili, right? He swindled his brother for a bowl of chili for his birthright. That had better been some darn good award-winning chili, right? Which men, by the way, at our next men's, we will have award-winning chili because Deanna won the chili cook-off. So come to the next men's, you will have award-winning chili. And I'll be making my smoked pheasant chili, which is awesome, by the way. If our life groups had it, it actually is very good. But anyway, he sold it all for a bowl of chili. That is a swindler. That is a brother who doesn't care about his twin brother. His very name, Jacob, supplanter or heel grabber. When Esau was born, Jacob's holding on to his heel as if you're not leaving without me, right? Drag me through. When it was time to give the blessing, Isaac was going to bless Esau. Tells Esau, take up your bow and your arrow and go get me some tasty food. There's God's command for us to go hunt with bows and arrows, right? I'm thankful I live in the age where we can use black powder and shotguns and guns, to be honest with you. But as he comes in, that's a guy who can't shoot a bow right there. But they have crossbows. We can do it with crossbows. But in that whole thing, Jacob is the guy that listens to his mom and deceives his old dad, his dying dad, right? He puts on some hair on his arms, wears some of Esau's clothing so he smells like the good old outdoors, right? Made his hands feel like they were callous somehow, right? Which you really can't hardly do. But he deceives his dad Isaac to get the blessing. This is the guy that God says, I am the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. This guy is a first-class deceiver. Because he steals the birthright, he has to take off, right? Rebecca tells him, you need to go back to where I am from and you need to hide there until your brother Esau calms down, because Esau was a man's man, right? Outdoors man, had a bow and arrow, probably used his muscles, probably strong. What we know of Jacob, he was a man of the tent while he was coming up. In other words, he hung around mom, knew how to cook, knew how to do all this stuff around the house, probably was good with finance, right? Didn't have calluses on his hands. So he should be afraid of Esau, right? He took off. And as he takes off, he comes to the land where his mom was from, and he meets up with Laban's family, okay? And that's where we pick up the story in Genesis 29, verse 6. Now, Laban had 2 daughters. The name of the older daughter was Leah, and the name of the younger was Rachel. Leah's eyes were weak, but Rachel was beautiful in form and appearance. Now, that term, eyes were weak, it literally means light eyes. So instead of those dark eyes, those Hebrew eyes, those Eastern eyes that would show beauty or show that, hey, I'm something to be desired, her eyes may have been blue, may have been a different color, we don't know. Some have pontificated that because it says that Rebekah was beautifully in form and desired, that maybe Leah was a little bit on the not so beautiful side. That's a nice way of saying she was ugly, all right? Not ugly, that wouldn't be right. Homely. How's that? Whatever you want to say, the fact is that if you put Leah next to Rachel and you just looked on outer appearances, people are gathering toward Rachel's side. That's who Leah is. That's her stigma, if you will. So Jacob is going to stay with Laban, and he decides that he wants to marry Rachel. Man, she's so beautiful. I got to have her for my wife. So he comes up with this plan, asking, hey, what can I do? I want Rachel's hand. I don't have anything to give you. He goes, why don't you work for me for 7 years? At the end of that 7 years, I will give you Rachel as your wife. Jacob goes, deal, right? Works 7 years. He knows exactly when the time comes. And he goes, hey, it's time for me to get my wife. Laban, let's do this thing. Laban goes, okay. They throw this big party. Jacob probably enjoys the ceremonial wine a little too much, right? And on the wedding night, Laban, who is, again, going to be Jacob's father-in-law, gets the best of Jacob. He deceives him. Instead of giving him Rachel, he gives him Leah. Well, Jacob, in his altered state, stumbles into his marriage tent in the evening, and when he wakes up in the morning, he goes, I'm married to a waitress and I don't even know her name, right? That country song, that could have been written about this right here. You weren't my waitress, you're missing your front tooth. Oh, no, yeah, uh-oh. That's Jacob. He was a country singer, you didn't even know it, did he? This isn't what I bargained for. So he goes to Laban and says, what's going on? He goes, hey, in our country, I can't marry off my younger daughter till my older one's married. I'll tell you what, you spend this week with Leah like you're supposed to in your honeymoon tent and everything, and as soon as this week is over, I'm going to give you Rachel at the low, low bargain price of 7 more years of labor. Jacob didn't even throw a fit. He goes, you bet. That's how much he loved Rachel. So he does 7 more years. After that 1 week, Laban gives Rachel to him as his wife, and life moves on. And we read in verse 31, the very passage Mark read for us early, about what happened. It says, when the Lord saw that Leah was hated. In other words, the affection that Jacob had for Rachel made how he treated Leah look like hate. When God saw that he opened her womb, but Rachel was barren. And Leah conceived and bore a son, and she called his name Reuben. For she said, because the Lord has looked upon my affliction, for now my husband will love me. She conceived again, bore a son, and said, because the Lord has heard that I am hated, he has given me this one also. And she called his name Simeon. And again she conceived and bore a son, and said, now, this time, my husband will be attached to me, because I have borne him 3 sons. Therefore, his name will be called Levi. Do you see something in those first 3 births, how Leah reacts? Oh, don't get me wrong. She throws the Lord's name in there because she knows that children are a gift from the Lord. She knows that they are a treasure. They even understood back then, before Psalms and Proverbs were written, where we're given those verses. She understood how important it was to bear man-child, someone that would carry the name, someone that could protect the house, someone that could help provide for the whole family in the field or with the flocks. She knew how important it was, But notice what she kept referring to. This time my husband. This time my husband. He has to this time. After all 3 sons, she talks like this. But then we get to the 4th son. Verse 35. And she conceived again and bore a son and said, notice, this time I will praise the Lord. See, somewhere between that 3rd son and the 4th, she realized something. She realized that God's the one in control. And if I'm going to live my life pursuing after Jacob, pursuing after his affections, thinking that anything I do, everything I do, that somehow I'm going to force him, that I can manipulate him to love me, her life was miserable. She says, this time, I'm going to praise the Lord. And she gave him the name Judah. You would think after she bears 4 sons, and she's 4 and Rachel's 0, right? It's 4-0, right? In the World Series, that would have been it, right? Game over, someone's up 4, right? But that's not what happened. Things really don't get much better for Leah. The ladies keep going. Kids grow up, and about the time that Reuben is 5 years old, the Bible tells us another story. In Genesis chapter 30, verse 14, we read this. In the days of the wheat harvest, Reuben, who was about 5 at this time, went out and found mandrakes in the field and brought them to his mother Leah. Now, mandrakes were this thing that they thought to be an aphrodisiac and would improve fertility, and they were a sought-after item. So 5-year-old, remember this, 5-year-old Reuben finds these mandrakes in the wheat field. Rachel said to Leah, please give me some of your son's mandrakes. But she said to her, is it a small matter that you have taken away my husband? Would you take away my son's mandrakes also? I'm going to stop here before I read the rest. Rachel and Jacob, that was a match set. That's a match set. This is a 5-year-old boy, and what does Rachel want to do for her own benefit? I want to take away the 5-year-old's find. How many of you, we just had Halloween, how many of you went through your kids' candy to make sure it wasn't poisoned, right? Or were you teaching them about taxes and said, here is the dad tax, right? Because we want them to understand how the government's a bad thing when they tax too much, right? Here's the tax on your car. Here's the tax on your home. Here's a tax for the groceries you bought. Here's a tax for having a tax and living in the United States, right? And you're going to die someday, so I'm going to take 40% of everything that you have on top of everything else I've taken, right? Anybody do that to their kids? Yeah. Or you just wait till they fall asleep and go, oops, you forgot you ate all those, right? Rachel tries to take away a 5-year-old's find. Rachel is the one that when they finally leave Laban, she's the one that steals the idols, very valuable things, with gold and precious metal and encrusted usually with pearls or jewelry. She's the one who hides and steals those when they leave. That is Rachel, the swindler, the out for herself, the focused on herself. Again, much like Jacob. These two were a matched set. Maybe that's why he kind of gravitated for her. Let's go on. Rachel said, then he may lie with you tonight in exchange for your son's mandrakes. Leah had to be the bride. You know, Leah didn't have a choice. Her dad said, you are going to marry him. You're going to go into him. This is my best chance to get you married off, Leah. And she was in this relationship with Jacob. And she was at this constant fight for his time, for his attention. By this verse, the implication is that Jacob didn't stay near Leah's tent much. That he was always going home to Rachel. Notice in verse 16, when Jacob came from the field in the evening, Leah went out to meet him and said, you must come in to me, for I have hired you with my son's mandrakes. So he lay with her that night, and God listened to Leah, and she conceived and bore Jacob a 5th son. She had to hire her husband to spend time with him. Are you getting this very, very uncomfortable picture of Leah? Are you even maybe getting a very uncomfortable picture of how good of man, how good of husband Jacob was at this time in his life? God was still faithful to Leah. We read on in verse 19, and Leah conceived again. This would be the sixth, and she bore Jacob a sixth son. Then Leah said, notice, God has endowed me with a good endowment. And here she is again thinking, now my husband will honor me because I have borne him 6 sons. So she called his name Zebulun. Leah, even though she was focusing on God, she couldn't get away from that personal feeling that she wanted her husband's affection. She wanted her husband's attention. And it seemed no matter what she could do, he wouldn't reciprocate. Man, years of living in that relationship. Would Leah ever get Jacob's love? Well, we get a little glimpse of what happens over time when we see Jacob near the end of his life. Now remember, God wrestles with Jacob. Jacob has that dream. He sees the ladder, angels ascending and descending. He grabs a hold of what we believe is Jesus Christ incarnate, and they wrestle. The angel touches him, knocks his hip out of joint, changes his name from Jacob, heel supplanter grabber, to Israel. So from that point on, Jacob's life changes. And we get this at Jacob's end of the life. It's on your bulletin, one of the verses. But notice what happens. Genesis 49:29. As he's telling his sons what he wants done when he dies, he then commanded them and said to them, I am to be gathered to my people. Bury me with my fathers in the cave that is in the field of Ephraim of the Hittites, in the cave that is in the field at Machpelah, to the east of Mamre, in the land of Canaan. And Abraham brought with the field from Ephraim the Hittites to possess as a burying place. Verse 31, there they buried Abraham and Sarah his wife. There they buried Isaac and Rebekah his wife. Notice this, and there I buried Leah. Rebekah died, giving birth to Benjamin. He buried her wherever they were sojourning. They did put up some pillars that the Bible tells us were still there to that day. But the place of honor, the place where Jacob wants to lay eternally, the place that is reserved for Jacob's wife, is where Leah is put to rest. So clearly, her being faithful to the Lord, her being faithful in a terrible, what anyone would say is a terrible relationship all those years, is paid off in some small way while she's still on her. So what are some lessons we can learn from Leah? Well, first of all, and here's a tough one, it is possible to be faithful through a loveless marriage. I know, I've heard some of your stories in this room. Some of you have left a loveless, abusive relationship. But Leah decided that she was going to be faithful in spite of whatever came her way. She was still going to be faithful. This isn't just a woman thing, by the way. Many men are trapped or they are in a marriage that is without love, that is without compassion. See, we as people understand, or we try and manipulate the situation. Men try and manipulate women all the time, right? If you love me, if you love me, and then women, oh, you don't love me. Whatever it may be, we try and manipulate the situation all the time. And the place that people usually hurt other people the worst is in marriage. You know why? Because biblical marriage is a covenant that says, till death do us part. And if I lash out against my wife, she can't go anywhere. At least she's not supposed to. If I lash out against my husband, he has to accept me. He has to forgive me. So usually the places of the biggest conflict, the biggest hurt, are in our marriages. Paul said, if you are married, you will have trouble. Satan wants to destroy marriages because it's God's institution. Through marriage is how we get the Messiah. Through marriage, we're supposed to see how unconditional love works. Satan is always attacking it. So in marriage, it's always easy to take for granted. It was easy for Jacob not to treat Leah with the respect and the love that she deserved. even though she wasn't his first choice, it was the wife he stuck with. He didn't put her out. He stayed with her. And in the Bible, we see where many people divorce and go their separate ways. Jacob didn't do that. And Leah kept being faithful, even when her spouse was unfaithful. A second thing we see from Leah, she was exhausted or exhausted herself, however you want to say it, trying to gain or chase her husband's love. You know, we can exhaust ourselves seeking after things from people who can't give us what we need. I'm here to tell you today, I don't care what Oprah says, I don't care what Dr. Phil says, if you are trying to find your self-worth in anything but Jesus Christ and the God of the Bible, you will be let down and you will be miserable. Do you know why? Because we live in a fallen world with fallen people and they are going to hurt you. God says you are loved. God says you are fearfully and beautifully and created by Him with His hands, that He knit your DNA together, that He made you the way you are. Big nose, big hands, whatever you think it is. God said, I made you that way. You are perfect. I love you. If that's not enough for you, you are going to spend your time in depression and misery. She got exhausted trying to chase after Jacob's love. I think once she realized that God was the one in control, once she gave that over to God, I want to believe, the Bible's not giving us all this stuff, but I believe she found peace. We don't hear her complaining as much anymore. And we find her buried in the tomb of Abraham and Isaac, right next to our husband. We can exhaust ourselves trying to fix things. We can try and get out of that gate, out of that corral, out of that place of provision by God, and we can try and make things happen, and all we're going to find is that we have made ourselves more tired. We're probably going to hurt ourselves more, right? Than just trusting and waiting on God. God's timing. Was she ever frustrated? Oh, we see it. But she still was patient. She was still faithful, and she had to learn that she couldn't make her husband love her. She had to wait on God. Third thing we see in Leah is that her faithfulness is rewarded in time. Oh, it's delayed. It's not the time frame she wants. It's not when she wanted it to happen. She didn't understand why when she was giving so much in this relationship and Jacob wasn't seeming to return much of it. But when the time was right, Leah's dreams, her hopes came to be. You know, in this story, I'm sure all of us can see a glimpse of ourselves. Are we pacing the gate about something that we really should be waiting on God for? Are we trying to advance God's timing instead of following His rules, stepping outside of His boundaries to try and find that love or try and find that wealth, whatever it is we think we need, instead of being patient and waiting on God to bring things about in His timing? Back to our verse, Isaiah 40:51. They that wait on the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. You ever watched an eagle fly? Right? Does he go around like this? I gotta fly. Or if you go to pheasant hunting, right, you do the pheasant dance. That's not what eagles do. How do eagles fly? They got big old wings, and what do? They catch the wind. Their big wingspan allows them to soar higher and cover greater distances by simply riding the upcurrents and downcurrents of the wind. Mounting up with wings like eagles means we're not out there flapping. We're out there waiting on God to lift us and place us where we need to be. They will mount up with wings like eagles. They will run and not be weary. They will walk and not faint. The secret is not to be nervous, not to be pacing that gate, but to wait on the Lord. If anyone has a case, it's Leah. Forced into a loveless marriage, forced to serve a man that didn't seem to give a hill of beans difference about her most married life. But in her, we have an example of a faithful woman, a woman who got over herself and started seeing the blessings that God was giving her. And we see that God is faithful if we wait and trust Him. Get the praise team to come on up. We'll get ready to close with this song. Heaven's song. How I long for heaven. How I want everything to be put back into order, back into place that it should be. You know, however much we are struggling here today, I promise you, heaven's worth it. I promise you that whatever you're going through, following God's plan will pay off. Rebekah gave Jacob two sons. Rachel gave 2 sons. The rest of the tribes of Israel come from Leah. You talk about a blessing. You talk about a lasting heritage. It's from this woman who seemed to be rejected, who seemed to be a second thought in Jacob's life. Are we willing to wait and rest in God? Father, this morning as we close this song that Adam or Allison, whoever picked it, man, sure does speak volumes to what you do. That when people can look at a story of desperation, when people can look at a story of someone that would think is a loser, not so beautiful that everyone would look at her sister overshadows her, but because of her life, the entire world is blessed. Because we know your son came through Israel. God, what if she wasn't faithful? What if she gave up? What if she said, I'm out? Father, help us when everything seems lost to not quit, to wait, to be patient on you. In your name I pray.